Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of The Comical Heathen. This is my podcast and I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Jaffe. I'm a comedian, I'm a writer, I'm working on a book about religious satire. And so I've made it my mission to interview comedians and other interesting people. So thanks for stopping in. On today's episode, I'm going to share with you my interview with Chad Zumock, a touring headlining comedian from Cleveland. This episode's also going to have my response to an article about some controversial events that occurred in New Zealand earlier this year. We're going to find out, what do religion, satire, and boobs all have in common? So that's probably a pretty good tease, eh? You're going to stay to the end for that, right? And also, I'm going to give you an update from the Rabbit Hutch. Last episode, I mentioned that one of our lovely rabbits passed away earlier in the summer. That was poor little Kevin Bacon. I've received some emails and messages from fans and listeners and people just expressing their support and so on. A few people were asking questions about how our other rabbit, Newton, was doing. How was Newton dealing with his change to his life? So I'm going to give you an update from the Rabbit Hutch as well. But before my rant and before my update from the Rabbit Hutch, let me tell you about today's interview. So earlier this summer, I had a chance on the road to open for Chad Zumock. We were in Willoughby, Ohio, at the Willoughby Brewing Company, one of the great microbreweries in the area. And they put on comedy shows in there sometimes. Fun show. The owner there's a really fun guy. I opened. Our good friend Brian Kenny featured. Chad was the closer. And I just asked Chad if he'd sit down with me for a few minutes. If you don't know Chad, he's originally from Cleveland, now based in Los Angeles. He has a background in sketch comedy as well as working on the radio and broadcasting. He has his own podcast, which is a more traditional comedy interview podcast called Sit Down Zumock. So you might want to check that out. So we did the show together, and we're like, hey, let's get together. He had some interesting things to say. He talked about his upbringing and his parents and how that affects the comedy he does now. He talks about some of the ups and downs he's had. He talks about edgy comedians or comedians who do satire, including Doug Stanhope and Amy Schumer, some other people he's met along his own comedy journeys. So we're going to find out what he has to say about all of that. Before we get to it, I want to tell you one other thing. I have a newfound respect for those weather people on the news who go out into the storm. They stand there, there's a hurricane, they're hanging onto a pole, their hat blows off, rain, the wind, the lightning, they're easy target to make fun of. But on the other hand, they're out there doing it. And what happened to me was this. Chad and I were at the Willoughby Brewing Company. They're always busy on the weekends. And so we were in a really noisy bar. And the only thing we could think of to cut back on the noise, so I could talk to him for a few minutes, was to step out real quick into the parking lot. So that's what we did. And we had a very nice conversation. Again, I'll say thank you to Chad Zumock 10 times. What I found out when I got back home and listened back to the recording of the interview was there was a lot of wind in the background. I wasn't really paying attention to the wind because you're talking and wind's like a natural phenomenon. But it turned out it blew in and out of the interview. And wind is a background noise you cannot just edit out. It goes like right into the sound. If anybody out there does interviews or does podcasts, one of the most important things you can do is try to take control of your sound environment. That's why we went outside, to get away from the noise. So now I learned. So I just want to say, to get this interview to work for the podcast, I had to trim out some of the noisier bits of wind. So there are going to be a few times when you can hear the wind in the background, and thank you for putting up with my mistake. And on the other hand, there's a couple bits I just had to cut out because the wind was too much. So if it's a little jumpy or not like smoothly edited, that's completely my fault for dealing with the wind. So chalk that one up to lesson learned. Lesson learned. All right, so thank you for indulging me. I still think Chad said a lot of worthwhile and interesting and personal things, and I hope you find it interesting, and I want to honor Chad by representing all the things he shared the best that I can, despite that technical difficulty. So without further ado, my interview with Chad Zumock. Taking a deep breath. Welcome to the Comical Heathen. I'm sitting here outside of the Willoughby Brewing Company with Chad Zumock. Chad is a touring headliner and host of his podcast, Sit Down Zumock. Hey, Chad, how you doing?
Jerry Jaffe, a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming along.
I didn't know my dad till I was 21, and he's Italian, so he's
Okay.
very hardcore Catholic, and but I didn't have that in my life, and my mom was kind of like, I don't care.
Okay.
So I just kind of grew up without that guidance. So religion was never a huge thing in my life ever, and I'd go to church here and there, but it was just like I kind of learned as I went, and I was actually kind of fortunate because I didn't have to go through those, ups and downs and crazy experiences. A lot of people were growing up in Catholic households, and so I was able. And if I do have kids, I'm gonna let them pick what they want to do. Don't put them into a situation.
Sure. So as a comedian, it's just not a subject that you think about because you weren't raised to think about it.
I only think about it when I watch like The Keepers on Netflix, or just some situation like that. That's when I'm like, okay, this is not good. And my personal belief, and it's just from the it's a dummy's belief.
Right. Kent State graduate.
Kent State, I think it was 2.6 general studies, 7 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There's a lot of shit out there people believe in. There's people in other countries.
Right.
There's stuff that we don't even know what they believe. It's a rock. They think.
Yes.
Who knows what the right situation is? I believe religion can be good. I believe it means good things, but I don't know what's the pathway you want to take. I never subscribe to anything.
There might be like 10,000 different religions in the world right now.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes.
And if it's the Powerball, who's the best?
Yes.
Who's going to win?
Waiting for that ping pong ball to come up the chute.
Exactly. They might be the winner of the, the pearly gates.
Yes. Some cult on some island in the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
Yep.
Wait, Jerry, before we get that one cult, where was the cult where they all poisoned themselves and they went to sleep?
That was the Jim Jones.
The Jim Jones.
South America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was the Kool-Aid.
That was the Kool-Aid.
What was the ones where they fucked themselves up? Are we allowed to swear?
Yes, you can swear.
They took some poison. They went to sleep. It was like they're going on like a spacecraft.
Oh well, Jim Jones had a story similar to that, but you're thinking of Koresh and the Nude Davidians.
No, that was the Branch Davidians.
In Waco.
There was another one. I just don't know. Either way.
Well,
what if one of those?
It's happened more than once.
Yeah. What if one of those were the right religion?
Yes.
The right cult.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe David Koresh was onto something.
Yep. They're in heaven right now.
Yeah.
The rest of us
Heaven's Gate. That's what it was.
Okay, is it? I've never even heard of that except for the movie, but
Google Heaven's Gate.
Okay.
And cult.
I'll put a link to that in the description of this podcast so people know what the hell you're talking about.
They might have been on something.
Do you know any comedians working now, either just friends or on TV, who do religious satire really well?
He doesn't do religious satire, but he's almost a cult leader himself. Is Doug Stanhope?
Okay.
That guy has people following him around the country because of his words and his placements and how he views the world, and he almost has like a preacher quality to him where he's not even a stand-up comedian in my mind. I feel like he's a cult leader, thought provoker. He's a trailblazer. He's, I've got to open for him, and I've never felt more insecure knowing he was watching my act from the back of the room because he is so smart and so good with words and thoughts that I'm like, I can't. I'm not in the same room with this guy, and you want to impress your heroes, and unfortunately, I don't think I did.
How about some of the old classics like Carlin and Richard Pryor would do religious satire? Any of that mean anything to you when you were younger?
Those weren't influences of mine. Like I kind of came at comedy from a sketch background. I loved the Kids in the Hall and Saturday Night Live, and stand-up appealed to me because I didn't have to rely on two guys putting their wigs on and showing up on time, and I was like, I can do this myself.
Seems to me like there's been more religious satire since September 11th. I know I'm just throwing that at you, but
I haven't been keeping an eye on it.
Okay.
So I think a lot of things happened differently since September 11th.
Right.
So I can't. So I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe.
Okay. Right.
Things change, and the world changes and evolves. Our lives change, and people's perceptions change, and I'm sure religions change, and I'm sure. You know, we're in a weird part of this world right now where social media and everything's at your disposal. So
out on the road, have you ever seen any? Sometimes Road Warrior comics will talk about weird crowd interactions, like where someone in the audience brings up religion, or someone brings up Jesus, or you're in a religious area and you're guarded about what you say. Any kind of experiences like that?
Well, I do have one story I'll share with you. It's this recently happened to me. I auditioned for NACA.
Okay.
Which NACA basically is you can get on college tours. And
sure.
Right now, I didn't realize how overly sensitive.
Okay.
And I have one joke about Jehovah's Witnesses. I did it tonight.
Yep.
And that joke alone, that one joke.
Right.
By the way, I paid $2,500 to get into this thing.
Right.
And you're supposed to get your money back on top of money.
Right.
And not only did I not get my money back,
right.
Like there were colleges, went to my college agent going, "We're never going to book this guy ever."
Right.
So just because I said that, and it's not even that bad.
No. Yeah, I remember the joke. It's by religious satire standards, it's very tame.
It's tame as shit. But the colleges they don't want nothing to do with me after that. I'm like. And I looked at my college agent and I go, listen, I'm not doing this stuff anymore. I just wasted $2,500. Like,
right.
I'm a funny comic. You saw me open for Steve-O. Like, you've gotten me gigs without this NACA shit. So
right.
Find me gigs without NACA. I'm not doing it. And I haven't talked to him since.
Nothing's 100%, but my experience, because I do teach at a college and I visit other campuses, is the majority of students are not as easily offended as they're portrayed. I think those people are like deans or vice presidents. And so they're acting as gatekeepers, like, can we bring this guy to our college? I would be surprised if most students would even notice your Jehovah's Witness joke. Well, you know what I mean? Because it's a funny joke, but I mean in terms of offensive scale. It's not an offensive joke.
It's just like, it's whatever. It's
almost a tag to what you were saying in that routine.
I'm trying to move forward. Yeah, you're right. It's a tag. And the fact that they took such great offense to something so tame and lame, and I'm like, I guarantee you, if I was a pregnant lesbian, for some reason,
dream, Chad, dream,
I would have gotten 12 colleges off of that, just because I think diversity, I just think masculinity, I think alpha male, I think everything's under attack right now, and it's a weird point of view to be, or not a weird point of view. It's a weird time for like just a normal white guy to be doing comedy because of this extreme exposure with, you know. Black Lives Matter or diversity or feminism. It's just like, all right, enough's enough already. I'm an old school dude. I'm a guy.
Right.
And I like everybody, and I don't have any prejudice. I'm a cool dude. But how do you portray that and convey that?
Right. No, I think your stage persona comes across as likable and like a bro. Like, we're dudes hanging out. Let's joke around for a while.
And I can't change it. It's just, you either like me or don't. It's just like, I'm not trying to be somebody different. Like, yeah, Black lives do matter, but I'm not going to bring it up in my act.
Right. You're not a political or alt comic. You're...
I want to talk about being drunk and trying to drive.
Yeah. Something which affects people's lives, actually.
And stuff that happened to me personally. And I'm not trying to change your opinion. I'm like, Carlin was just such an observationalist, and like he was a wordsmith where he can just really...
Yes.
I'm just not that guy. Like, I'm jealous. It's 7 dirty words. I could never do that. It's fucking... That's another level of comedy.
Yes.
I'll die before that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say, in the dozen or so, 20, maybe more comedy shows I've produced at college campuses, I've never once had a student complain about content.
I know. The thing is the gatekeepers getting in.
Yes.
Once you get in, you can do whatever you want. I've done like 10 colleges.
Okay.
And it's always been through backdoor situations. And I've always been fine. The bookers like me. It was never a problem. But getting in has always been the fuck. Like those NACAs and the ACPAs and the ACP, whatever they are. And I have a college agent who puts me out on that shit. And the first one I did okay, and I ended up getting like 4 colleges. And I don't know. It's sensitive times right now.
When you were in Cleveland, you were around the younger comics and open mic scenes and doing local shows. I always appreciated you being like available and doing shows. If there's a young comic here asking you for advice about satire or being edgy, what kind of advice would you give them?
I think I'm a different person than I was 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I think I don't know. I kind of came up in this weird situation in Cleveland, and it's been weird. It's been, I don't know.
Sure.
I brought a lot of weird attention onto myself, and I feel like I was judged harshly, and I feel like at the same time, like I kind of hold resentment because of that. Because I feel like I've helped a lot of people, but at the same time, I also brought a lot of things on myself. But I'm always willing to help someone because stand-up is so hard. It is so difficult, and it's like at this point, like the wages, like what it was in the 80s.
Right.
Like it's not changing, and
Yes.
if you're fighting to do that, you must really love it.
Right.
Because it's insanity. Like
yes.
what I do, it's complete insanity.
Yes, it might be the only vocation in the country that the wages have been flat for 40 years. It's like literally the same as they were paying in the 80s. Clubs are paying.
And then when I get a theater gig like with Chris D'Elia and he gives me these paychecks, I'm like, are you kidding me? So that gives you hope. And like, oh my God, if I continue to push it and continue to write and be smart, one day in the right situation, right time, because it is timing and who you know, you might be able to pull those paychecks in. And I'm not chasing money because I do love doing it, but at the same time, it's just, you really got to want to do this because...
Oh, yeah. You got to love doing it before anybody will pay you for doing it, let alone paying you well.
And while you're doing it, you'll figure out how to do it.
Right.
Like I think the reason why I'm a full-time comic is I figure out how to do it. And there's a lot of ways to do it. And
by it, do you mean how to be a full-time comic?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just being...
Because you're your own travel agent, you're your own manager.
You got to be clever.
Yes.
You got to know people. And I couldn't be doing a full-time comedian job if I didn't know a guy at Southwest. Or if I didn't know a guy at Megabus. Or if I didn't know a guy at Enterprise. Right. It helps so much. Sure. And I'm very grateful for that.
Would you have any advice for a young comic just about being political or edgy? Is that
if you're gonna do it, go hard. But if you get and I hate to say this, but I'm gonna have to say it because I like her and I haven't talked to her in a long time, is Amy Schumer.
Sure.
And Amy I've known before her blow up.
Right.
She got by being the likable lady and the girl guys want to hang with.
Right.
Talked about her pussy, blah blah blah. And then she got famous and she started becoming hardcore liberal and gun stance.
Right.
And she started becoming, if you voted for Trump, leave my show. It's just, you're alienating the people that loved you and that what got you there. And I get people evolve and change. And I get she wanted to use her power to become a force.
Sure. But
at the end of the day, like you're hurting your ticket sales and you're hurting what made you become famous. And when you get famous, that's the worst time you can do it. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Chad. Before I let you go, this is just a question I like to end on, which is anything else about religious satire that you'd like to say that didn't come up in our conversation?
I respect the comedians that can pull it off.
Right.
And it's interesting. And personally, I just don't have the knowledge to do it.
Right.
That's all it is. It's just, I'm not smart enough to do it. And also, it's never been an interest of mine.
Right.
So when people talk about religion, I'm just not really I'm interested in the sense wow, you're that passionate about this.
As in getting to know a person.
Yeah. But I've been very grateful coming from a dumb mom, where she, even though she was dumb, my first best friend was black.
Right.
His name was Leroy, and we were best friends. So I never knew racism. I never knew I was very blessed to not know anything. So as I got older, I could see people for different, even Jehovah Witness. My best friend was Jewish. Jesse, nothing affected me.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chad. I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you, and be sure to check out my website, DaneCook.com.
We will. I'll make sure to include a link in the description of this podcast. Thank you, Chad Zumock. A really fun conversation. I know he's friends with Amy Schumer, and I really enjoyed what he had to say about her and for sharing some of the personal stories of his life. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. At the end of the last episode, I had updated you about a sad occurrence in the Jaffe household, which was the untimely passing of one of our pet rabbits, the beautiful Kevin Bacon, as my wife would call her, Kevin-y the Bun Bun. And yes, her name was Kevin, but she was a girl. We have non-gender specific pet naming policies in our house. Anyway, I did want to give you an update. Some people have emailed me or Facebooked me about the other rabbit. Our other rabbit is called Newton. He's also a Holland Lop. He's what's called a chocolate-colored lop because he's sort of very brown with black fuzzy edges and a kind of cute round nose. And when rabbits are bonded, as they were, very best friends living together, sometimes when one passes, the other one has a grieving process. I don't want to go into a long dissertation on that, but it's kind of an interesting point. One of the things about having rabbits as pets, by the way, is that they are not cats or dogs. They have their own psychology and personality. partially because I think they're prey animals. Cats and dogs, part of hunting packs, and so they have a high degree of playfulness. But rabbits are, like squirrels. They're out in the wild, and everything out there wants to eat them. So they're a little shy, a little skittish, and until they think of you as a member of their family, they might be a little withdrawn from their human family members. Now, when you have rabbits as pets and one of them passes, the surviving rabbit has to have a grieving period. So part of it is that rabbits are, simple animals who don't understand death. So it's actually recommended that you leave the deceased rabbit with the surviving rabbit, so the surviving rabbit can get used to the idea that their friend is no longer with them. Whereas if you just, shall we say, randomly remove the remains from the cage or from the habitat, the surviving rabbit doesn't really know what happened. So it gives them a better grasp of their partner's fate. And then the rabbits have all their own grieving period. They have to get used to being alone. I can tell you that we plan to get another rabbit or two in the next few months, but we actually want to let Newton kind of live on his own for a couple months so that he gets used to Kevin not being there and he gets used to being himself. And then later in the year, we'll introduce a new friend for him. All in all, Newton is doing well. He's very cheerful. I think he is turning to his human friends for more affection. Just last night, he ran all the way across the room, leapt up onto the couch, and landed straight on my chest where I was laying there lazily watching The Big Bang Theory. So that's what's going on in the rabbit hutch. And I also want to thank anybody who sent any kind messages about Kevin or Newton since the last episode. So that's a little bit about how Newton's doing. One of the interesting side effects of keeping rabbits as a pet is that we line their cages with newspapers. And then that has caused me to start reading newspaper headlines again. So it's very 20th century of me, right? My eye will catch interesting looking headlines. And this time my eyes caught a really interesting looking headline. This headline said, "Playboy model angers Maori community with nude shoot on sacred New Zealand volcano," by Jonathan Perlman in the May 2017 Telegraph. Now this piqued my interest immediately because it combines three of my favorite topics: religion, New Zealand, and boobs. This article tells the story of a Playboy model, Jaylene Cook, who climbed Mount Taranaki in New Zealand. Besides the religion angle and the baring of the breast angle, I also have a personal love of New Zealand. I lived there for several years, so I have many New Zealand friends, both of European descent, of Maori descent, other international community members. So I was very interested in this clash of cultures, if you will. So the Playboy model, Jaylene Cook, I want to make it clear that Jaylene isn't the Cook that is the highest mountain in New Zealand. No, she is not the Kiwi version of the Grand Tetons. But she did grow up there, which technically makes her a Kiwi, which is a fruit that looks like a bird. Or is it a bird that looks like a fruit? You can never keep that part straight. Okay, but I digress. Let me start over. A lovely pair of boobs attached to a lovely woman named Jaylene, who, having just climbed a challenging mountain in New Zealand, Mount Taranaki, celebrated at the top by having said boobs photographed and then posting these photos to her Instagram account. As a result, some indigenous people were complaining that this act was disrespectful because Mount Taranaki is a sacred mountain in the Maori tradition. So, regarding this, I began to wonder what their definition of sacred mountain was. Because all I know is, if Jaylene's posing nude, one way or another, there are some sacred mountains involved. It is weird, though, when you think about it. I don't know why so many religions try to teach that nudity is shameful. Even in the Bible, God creates Adam and Eve buck naked. Now, that may have just been, an example of gratuitous nudity to get more people to read it. But then God creates Eve, and then right away, 2 paragraphs later, the only genitals on earth are covered with fig leaves. Think about it. The only parts of the human body that actually fit together, hidden underneath a plant. Which doesn't make any sense, because, God can see when people are naked under their clothes. God has the ultimate X-ray vision, not just some upskirt cameras. He can see everything. Even what that kid did to that pie in that movie. Seriously, in the kitchen, People prepare food in there. Shame on you, Jason Biggs. Like, I don't know why people assume God would be upset by nudity. I mean, God created everything, so he's the one that invented nudity, so he can see naked bodies. But apparently, some religious people think he doesn't want you to marvel at his good works. It makes God sound like one of those dads that lectures his kids not to smoke pot right after he gets back from the dispensary, for you know his glaucoma. The indigenous people of New Zealand are called the Maori. They're Polynesian, and to them, Mount Taranaki is a sacred mountain. It's one of their ancestral mountains. Maori people believe that all parts of the natural world are inhabited by spirits or life force, and that this mountain has the spirit of one of their great warrior ancestors called Taranaki. Taranaki is a hero, a great warrior from mythology. I only emphasize that because there's no way this guy, this warrior, is threatened by a pair of boobs. There's nothing in the mythology to suggest that Taranaki was allergic to love pillows. And I can pretty much guarantee you there's no hetero male alive or dead in human form or mountain form who doesn't want to see a naked Playboy model. There's just no way Taranaki is going, "Whoa, lady, put those melons back in the grocery bag." I admit some Maori people might be offended, but Taranaki is good with it. If anything, he probably wants more nudity on his mountain, and the sooner the better. When it comes to breasts, men are like that dog from the movie Up. My master made me this collar. He is a good and smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may speak boobs. So I don't believe there's any way that Taranaki has any problems with Jaylene Cook's Twin Peaks on his summit. As an aside, is it weird that I'm starting to find mountaineering terminology strangely arousing? Ugh. Now, in this article, some of the offended Maori people tried to explain their position by making comparisons. One asked, "Would you want someone standing there naked in your church?" Yes, I would. I would want someone standing there naked in my church. There are over 10,000 religions in the world today, and mine includes nudity. In fact, I won't even go to church on Friday night unless I know there will be nudity. Oh, by the way, my church meets on Friday nights and involves nudity. So come out and join me. I mean us. I don't know about your church, but Jaylene Cook can come to my church anytime she wants. She has a standing there naked invitation. She can pose nude. She can preach nude. No one will try to stop her. In fact, I can't guarantee it, but we might even make eye contact with her at some point. Another Maori leader compared it to posing naked on the grave of your grandparents, since Taranaki is considered a Maori ancestor. Again, that probably depends on the person and who the grandparents are. Like, if your grandfather was Hugh Hefner, that would be totally fine. You can take all the naked pictures you want on that grave. In fact, it'd be disrespectful not to, really. The only question that might raise is how are you posing naked on Hugh Hefner's grave when he's still alive? But if there are boobs in the picture, no one will think to ask. Gotta have priorities, people. Turns out there's now this thing of tourists and world travelers taking nude pictures of themselves and posting them, mostly on Instagram, which is a vast improvement to all the dick pics on Tumblr. And it's way better than all the baby pictures on Facebook. My brother's new baby looks like an inside-out Shar-Pei is what I'm saying. Please, Joey, stop tagging me. I can't take any more photos of the elephant baby. I found a similar story from Malaysia, actually. Last year, a British woman and some of her friends were arrested for posing nude on a sacred mountain in Malaysia. Some of the locals there blamed their nudity for a subsequent earthquake that killed 18 people. How crazy is that, right? It's not only backwards thinking, there's zero evidence to support the very notion. I mean, look at me, I've been naked thousands of times, and no one involved has ever felt the earth move, I promise you. So Miss Cook was criticized for putting the photo on her Instagram account. Well, think about this. Whoever found it was looking through the Instagram feed of a Playboy model. What did they expect to find? A rebuttal of Keynesian economics? Not likely. Now, trying to defend herself, Cook said that nudity is not disrespectful. It's pure and beautiful and represents freedom, which I basically agree with. But you gotta admit, that's a pretty convenient answer for a nude model. What else would she say? "Oh, I really wanted to keep my clothes on, but was absolutely sweltering at the top of that snow-covered mountain. Getting naked is her livelihood, which in turn gives rise to my livelihood." It's a circle of life sort of thing, something like that. And really, what does all of this say? When you demonstrate the initiative to climb all the way to the top of a mountain, pretty much as far as you can be away from the rest of humanity, and even there, you're subjected to the prudish moors of sanctimonious scolds in the valleys far below. You've climbed to the summit of a mountain, and anonymous couch potatoes sit on their asses and click offended. The indigenous Polynesian people of New Zealand are called the Maori, and when European settlers arrived, they were called Pakeha. And right now New Zealand enjoys a largely successful bicultural culture, nation, government. I have many Pakeha and Maori friends, and when I lived there, Pakeha was the word used to describe me. The traditional Maori greeting is kia ora. We simply translate kia ora as be well or be healthy, but simply speaking, it can be used for both hello and goodbye. Kia ora. So with that in mind, let me just say thank you to Chad Zumock for being our interview subject for this episode. Thank you to all of you for listening. Make sure to go on iTunes and Stitcher and rate us and give us stars and share it with your friends and leave comments. All that good stuff you're supposed to do to support a podcast. I want to thank my friend Jeff Geddert for providing technical assistance as well as additional writing. And I'd also like to thank my good friend Mark Bell, who is playing the lovely Bach music you hear. He's playing it on a Skinner organ, famous organ that is found on the campus of Lake Erie College in Paynesville, Ohio. With that being said, let me just say one more time, thank you, kia ora.